Step aside, little girl. This is a military installation, not a college campus. Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison's voice echoed across the Norfolk Naval Base checkpoint as he blocked the young Asian woman in the Stanford hoodie, her messenger bag dangling from one shoulder. 37 people watched. 12 phones recorded. And not a single person knew that in exactly 43 minutes, this same woman would save every life on the largest naval base in the world. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below so we can see how far this story has traveled. The metal detector screamed 3 times in rapid succession. Maya Chen stood perfectly still, her sneakers planted exactly shoulder-width apart her spine, straight in a way that seemed automatic rather than conscious. Her face betrayed nothing, not embarrassment, not anger, not even mild annoyance, just calm, measured patience that seemed wildly out of place for a 24-year-old woman being publicly detained at a military checkpoint. I said step aside. Morrison moved closer, his combat boots clicking against the polished floor with deliberate authority. Now. Copy that. The response came out crisp and clean, the words carrying a weight that seemed inconsistent with her youthful appearance. Chief Petty Officer Williams looked up from his paperwork, something prickling at the back of his mind. Copy that. Not okay or sure or whatever you say. Copy that. Military acknowledgement from someone who looked like she should be studying for finals. Morrison didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying his moment. Arms out. Don't move unless I tell you to. He swept the handheld wand over her shoulders, down her arms, across her torso. The device remained silent until it reached her left wrist, where it erupted in a series of sharp beeps. What's this? Maya glanced down at the simple black Casio strapped to her wrist. Standard timepiece. Take it off. She complied without protest, placing the watch in Morrison's outstretched palm. As she did, he noticed something that made him pause, a thin line of lighter skin around her wrist, accompanied by small indentations that suggested she had worn something much heavier there. Something official. Something substantial. The wand continued its journey, silent across her back, silent down her legs. Then it reached her messenger bag on the conveyor belt, and the X-ray operator's voice cut through the checkpoint's ambient noise. Sergeant Morrison. Petty Officer Martinez leaned closer to his monitor, his young face creased with uncertainty. You need to see this. Morrison strode over, leaving Maya standing in the secondary screening area. The monitor displayed the bag's contents in ghostly outlines. Wallet, keys, phone, lipstick, and something else. Something that made Morrison's eyes narrow with predatory satisfaction. A rectangular device, compact, metal housing, internal components visible as darker shadows. LED indicators along one edge. What appeared to be a retractable antenna folded against its side. Well, well. Morrison's voice carried across the entire checkpoint, loud enough for everyone to hear. Bag search, now! Maya approached the stainless steel examination table without being asked. Her movements were economical efficient, the kind of controlled motion that came from years of training, rather than natural grace. Empty everything onto the table. She began removing items methodically. Wallet first, then keys attached to a simple keychain, her phone an older model with a cracked screen protector, travel tissues, reading glasses in a worn leather case. Is that everything? Negative. Maya caught herself. I mean, no. There's one more item. She reached into the bag's interior pocket and withdrew the device that had appeared on the X-ray. A compact unit about the size of a deck of cards, its metal housing scratched and worn from obvious use. Several small LED indicators ran along one edge, and a thin antenna was folded against its side. Morrison's eyes lit up like Christmas had come early. What is that? Electronic frequency monitor. Signal detection equipment. The honesty of her response seemed to catch Morrison off guard, but only for a moment. His expression shifted from surprised to triumphant, the look of a man who had just caught exactly the kind of suspicious activity he had been trained to identify. Signal detection equipment. He repeated the words, slowly savoring each syllable. And why exactly would a college student need signal detection equipment at the largest naval installation in the world? It's personal equipment, old habit. Old habit. Morrison laughed, the sound carrying no humor. Ma'am, this looks like military-grade surveillance gear. You're going to need a much better explanation than old habit. The line of tourists behind Maya had stopped moving entirely. Parents pulled children closer. Elderly visitors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Phones continued recording from multiple angles, capturing every moment of the confrontation for posterity. Morrison activated his radio. Base security, this is VCC Checkpoint Alpha. I need a supervisor to my location. Possible espionage equipment. Unknown civilian carrying surveillance technology. The response crackled back immediately. Copy VCC Alpha. Duty officer en route. ETA 4 minutes. Maintain security posture. Roger that. Morrison turned back to Maya with barely concealed satisfaction. Ma'am, you're going to remain exactly where you are until my supervisor arrives. Don't touch anything on that table. Don't reach for your phone. Don't even think about moving. Maya nodded once. A crisp acknowledgement that lasted exactly 1 second. Then she returned to standing at what could only be described as a relaxed position of attention. Her shoulders squared, her chin level with the floor. Williams watched her from across the checkpoint, his experienced eyes cataloging details that seemed increasingly inconsistent with her appearance. The way she stood, the way she responded to orders, the automatic military terminology that kept slipping into her speech. He had served under female officers before. Tough, competent women who had earned their positions through skill and dedication. Something about this young woman triggered those same instinctive recognitions. But that was impossible. She couldn't be more than 25 years old. Barely old enough to have finished college, let alone accumulated the kind of command experience that her bearing suggested. The minutes stretched like hours. Maya remained motionless, showing none of the nervous energy that typically accompanied civilian encounters with military security. Most people would be asking questions by now, demanding explanations, expressing frustration or fear. She simply waited, her expression neutral, her posture perfect. At 11:47 a.m., Master-at-Arms, Petty Officer, First Class Johnson, pushed through the checkpoint doors. A large man with 2 decades of Navy experience, Johnson had seen his share of genuine threats and false alarms. His presence immediately shifted the dynamic in the room, causing even the watching tourists to quiet their whispered conversations. Sergeant Morrison, situation report. Morrison gestured toward Maya, and the items spread across the examination table. Sir, civilian attempting to bring electronic surveillance equipment into the facility. Device appears to be military specification frequency monitor. Subject has been evasive about its purpose and presence. Johnson approached the table and examined the device without touching it. After a moment, he picked it up and turned it over in his hands. His eyes found military procurement numbers etched into the metal housing. Authentic Navy equipment, though several generations old. Ma'am, Johnson's voice was calm, professional, carrying none of Morrison's theatrical hostility. Can you explain how you came to possess military equipment? It belonged to my father, Navy communications specialist. I kept it after he passed. The explanation was plausible, but it raised immediate questions. Why bring it to Norfolk at all? Why carry it through security rather than leaving it in her car? And why did someone who claimed to be simply honoring her father's memory move and speak like someone with extensive military training? Ma'am, even if this device belonged to your father, bringing it onto a military installation without proper authorization is still a serious matter. Johnson pulled out a small notebook. I'm going to need to see some identification. Maya reached for her wallet, extracted her driver's license, and placed it on the table. Johnson examined it carefully. Maya Lin Chen. Age 24. Address in Palo Alto, California. The photo matched the woman standing before him. Miss Chen, what's the purpose of your visit to Norfolk today? Memorial observance. My father served here before his deployment overseas. He always talked about this base. Another reasonable explanation. Norfolk hosted memorial visits regularly. Families of deceased service members often came to honor their loved ones at the places they had served. But Johnson's instincts were telling him there was more to this story than a simple memorial visit. Miss Chen, I'm going to need to contact our duty officer about this situation. The device will need to be secured while we verify your story. Before Johnson could reach for his radio, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then steady again. Around the checkpoint, electronic systems began behaving erratically. Computer screens flashed random characters. The X-ray machine's monitor went dark for several seconds before rebooting. Radio communications filled with sudden static and interference. Martinez called out from his position at the scanner. Sir, my system just crashed. Trying to restart. Johnson keyed his radio. Base operations, this is VCC Alpha. Are you experiencing technical difficulties? The response came back, garbled, fragmented by interference. All stations, technical difficulties, investigating, maintain, protocols. The transmission cut off entirely, leaving only white noise. Williams moved closer to Johnson's position, his experienced instincts suddenly on high alert. Sir, this feels coordinated. Systems don't fail like this simultaneously without cause. Maya Chen spoke for the first time since the technical issues began, and her voice had changed. Where before she had sounded like a cooperative civilian dealing with an unfortunate misunderstanding, now there was steel beneath her words. This isn't equipment failure. Every head turned toward her. What did you say? Morrison demanded. Maya pointed at the device on the examination table. That equipment has been detecting increasing electronic interference for the past 17 minutes. The signal patterns indicate systematic jamming of military communication frequencies. Your base is under a coordinated electronic warfare attack. Morrison laughed, but the sound was uncertain now. And a 24-year-old college student would know this, how... Maya met his eyes directly, and something in her gaze made him take an involuntary step backward. Because I wrote the protocols that were supposed to prevent exactly this type of attack. The words hung in the air like a detonation waiting to happen. Before anyone could respond, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing the checkpoint in the harsh red glow of battery-powered backup lighting. Most electronic systems remained dark and unresponsive. The sophisticated security equipment that normally monitored every aspect of the checkpoint sat silent and useless. 37 tourists clustered together near the entrance, their voices rising in worried murmurs. Parents gathered children close. Elderly visitors looked around with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. The emergency broadcast system crackled to life, one of the few systems designed to function during electronic warfare conditions. All Norfolk Naval Base personnel, this is Base Operations Emergency Broadcast. We are experiencing a coordinated cyber attack on all electronic systems. All communications are compromised. Shift to manual protocols immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Morrison's face had gone pale in the red emergency lighting. His earlier confidence had evaporated entirely, replaced by the dawning realization that something far more serious than a routine security check was unfolding around him. Johnson made a command decision. Morrison, seal the checkpoint. No one enters or exits until we determine the scope of this situation. As Morrison moved to implement the order, Maya stepped forward. Her entire bearing had transformed. The cooperative civilian who had patiently endured public scrutiny was gone, replaced by someone who radiated unmistakable command authority. "Petty Officer Johnson." Her voice cut through the confused chatter of frightened tourists and stressed security personnel. "You need to initiate immediate lockdown protocols for all non-essential areas, seal the external gates, activate manual backup systems, and prepare for potential hostile ground action." Johnson stared at her. "How do you know what protocols we should follow?" "Because I helped design them." Williams felt a chill run down his spine. The voice, the bearing, the unconscious assumption of authority. He had heard all of it before, years ago. But where had he encountered this level of command presence in someone so young? "Miss Chen." Johnson's voice was careful now, uncertain. "Are you saying you have military experience?" Maya's eyes swept across the checkpoint, cataloging assets, evaluating defensive positions, calculating evacuation routes. The assessment took approximately 2 seconds. "I'm saying I have military command experience, Petty Officer, and right now your base needs it." A new alarm began sounding. Not the electronic beeping of computerized systems, but the mechanical wail of a manually activated warning siren. The sound was unmistakable and terrifying. A warning that Norfolk Naval Base was facing immediate danger. Johnson's training kicked in automatically. "All civilians to designated shelter areas. Move quickly, but don't run. Follow emergency evacuation routes." But even as he spoke, he realized the problem. With communications down and electronic systems compromised, he had no way to coordinate the evacuation. No way to communicate with other security personnel. No way to know what threats waited outside the checkpoint doors. "Petty Officer," Maya's voice cut through his uncertainty. "The manual evacuation protocols designate shelter areas Alpha 7 through Alpha 12 for civilian visitors. Primary routes are compromised because electronic locks on security doors have failed. You'll need to use emergency manual overrides and route people through the administration building." Johnson stared at her. The information she had just provided was detailed, accurate, and absolutely not something a civilian visitor should know. Emergency shelter designations were not public information. The specific details about manual overrides and alternate routing suggested intimate knowledge of Norfolk's security infrastructure. "Who are you?" The question came out flat, demanding. Maya Chen looked at him directly. For the first time since the crisis began, something like conflict flickered across her face. She was clearly weighing how much to reveal, calculating the implications of exposing her true identity. "Right now, I'm the only person in this checkpoint who knows how to get these people to safety. That's what matters." It was a deflection, but it was also true. And Johnson was running out of time to make decisions. "Morrison," he turned to the younger man, "begin manual evacuation procedures. Martinez, secure all classified materials." Then he looked at Maya. "Miss Chen, I don't know who you are or how you know what you know, but right now, I need help. If you can actually get these people to safety, I'm listening." Maya nodded once. A crisp acknowledgement that somehow conveyed both acceptance and assumption of responsibility. She turned toward the crowd of frightened tourists. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice carried easily over the emergency sirens, commanding attention without shouting, "I need everyone to listen carefully and follow instructions exactly." The crowd turned toward her, and something in her bearing, the unmistakable presence of someone accustomed to being obeyed, quieted their worried chatter immediately. Parents stopped comforting children to listen. Elderly visitors straightened up, recognizing something familiar in her demeanor. Military veterans among the tourists found themselves responding to authority they couldn't consciously identify. "We're going to move as a group to a secure area of the facility. Stay together. Follow the person in front of you. Remain calm. This is a precautionary measure. You are not in immediate danger. The tourists began forming into a loose line, responding to her directions with surprising compliance. It was as if her natural command presence had activated some instinctive response, a willingness to follow someone who clearly knew what she was doing. Morrison watched this transformation with his mouth hanging open. 5 minutes ago, he had been publicly humiliating this woman, treating her like a potential spy, enjoying his moment of authority over someone he had dismissed as irrelevant. Now she was organizing the evacuation with more competence than he had demonstrated in his entire career. The sound of helicopter rotors became audible outside. Not the familiar sounds of routine naval aviation. Something different. Something wrong. Williams moved to a small window and peered through the emergency-tinted glass. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Sir," his voice was tight. "3 helicopters approaching from the southeast. Military configuration, no standard U.S. Markings." Maya was beside him in an instant, her eyes tracking the approaching aircraft with professional assessment. Transport configuration, probably 12 to 15 personnel each. They're establishing a perimeter around the main administrative complex. She turned back to Johnson. "We need to move now. Those helicopters aren't here for observation." "How do you know that?" "Because I know exactly what a coordinated assault on a naval installation looks like, petty officer, and we are watching one unfold in real time." Johnson made another command decision, one that went against every regulation in the book. "Miss Chen, I'm temporarily designating you as a civilian advisor during this emergency. Help me get these people to safety." Maya didn't waste time acknowledging the irregular appointment. She moved to the head of the tourist group and began leading them toward the emergency exit. "Stay close. Move quickly. No talking." As they entered this corridor beyond the checkpoint, the true scope of the attack became apparent. Emergency lighting cast harsh red shadows across walls lined with darkened electronic displays. Automated doors that should have been sealed stood partially open, their magnetic locks disabled by the cyber assault. The familiar hum of climate control systems had gone silent, replaced by an oppressive quiet, broken only by distant alarms and the growing thunder of helicopter rotors. Maya navigated the corridors with obvious familiarity, making turns and choosing routes that suggested intimate knowledge of the facility's layout. Williams fell into step beside Johnson, keeping his voice low. "Sir, she knows this space. Not like someone who studied a map, like someone who has walked these corridors hundreds of times." "I noticed." "Sir, I served aboard the USS Roosevelt for 3 years. I've seen flag officers with less command presence than that woman." "I noticed that too." They reached a junction where 3 corridors intersected. Maya stopped her head tilting slightly as she listened to something the others couldn't hear. "Change of route. Primary corridor is compromised." She turned left instead of continuing straight. "This way. Maintenance passage connects to Shelter Alpha 9. "How do you know the primary corridor is compromised?" Morrison demanded, his voice carrying an edge of hysteria that he couldn't quite control. Maya glanced at him, and her expression suggested she was evaluating whether he was worth the time required to answer. "Because I can hear boot steps on metal grating. Approximately 8 personnel, moving in tactical formation, 60 meters ahead and closing." She paused. "Any other questions, Sergeant, or can we focus on not dying?" Morrison shut his mouth. The maintenance passage was narrow, forcing the group to move in single file. Maya led the way, her movements confident despite the limited visibility. Behind her, 37 tourists followed in frightened silence, their trust in this mysterious young woman somehow overcoming their terror at the situation unfolding around them. They emerged into a wider corridor just as gunfire erupted somewhere in the distance. Sharp, controlled bursts that spoke of military training rather than panic. "Almost there." Maya's voice remained calm, steady, the voice of someone accustomed to operating under extreme pressure. Shelter Alpha 9 is through the next security door. The door in question was sealed, its electronic lock displaying a red indicator that should have meant no access without proper authorization codes. Maya approached the access panel, pulled a small tool from her pocket, and removed the panel's face with practiced efficiency. "What are you doing?" Johnson asked. "Manual override." Her fingers worked inside the panel, manipulating components that were hidden from view. These systems were designed with hard-coded backup access for exactly this scenario. You just need to know which wires to bridge. 10 seconds later, the door's lock clicked open. They filed into Shelter Alpha 9, a reinforced section of the administration building designed to protect personnel during emergencies. The space contained emergency supplies, backup communications equipment, and protective barriers designed to withstand various threats. Maya moved immediately to a control panel near the entrance. Her fingers danced across controls that most people didn't even know existed. "Miss Chen," Johnson approached her position. "That's restricted access equipment." "I know." She didn't stop working. "It's also our only way to establish contact with base operations while the main systems are down." Her hands moved over the communications equipment with obvious expertise, making adjustments and connections that suggested deep technical knowledge. Within moments, she had established a weak but functional radio link. "Base operations, this is Shelter Alpha 9. We have 37 civilians secure and accounted for. Request situation report on current threat status." The response came back immediately, the voice on the other end tense with stress. "Shelter Alpha 9. This is base operations actual. Identify yourself and report your authorization for accessing this frequency." Maya's hand holding the radio handset paused. She looked at Johnson, then at Williams, then at Morrison, who was still staring at her like she had grown a second head. She made a decision. "Base operations, this is Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen, Naval Cyber Warfare Command. Authorization code, Alpha Tango 77 Echo. I am assuming tactical command of civilian protection and manual defense coordination." The radio fell silent. In Shelter Alpha 9, every person stared at the young woman they had believed was a college student making a memorial visit. Williams felt pieces clicking into place in his memory. Morrison's face had gone from pale to ashen, the full weight of his earlier behavior crashing down on him like a physical blow. The radio crackled back to life. "Lieutenant Commander Chen." The voice on the other end had changed completely. Where before there had been suspicion and demand, now there was something approaching awe. "Ma'am, we were told you were on classified assignment. Overseas. We thought..." "Captain Morrison." Maya's voice cut through his confusion with surgical precision. "I need a complete status report on which defensive systems remain operational and which manual override protocols are available, and I need it now." "Yes, ma'am. Admiral, we have hostile forces attempting to breach the main gate, secondary incursions at 3 additional points, and all electronic defense systems remain compromised. We're trying to implement manual protocols, but most personnel don't know the manual procedures." Maya finished his sentence. "Understood. Captain, I want you to listen very carefully. I'm going to give you instructions for activating Protocol 00 Alpha. That will restore limited functionality to your primary defensive systems." "Ma'am, Protocol 00 Alpha isn't in any operational manual I've ever seen." "That's because it was classified above your clearance level, Captain. And right now I'm the senior officer with knowledge of its implementation." She paused. "I designed it for exactly this scenario. Now, do you want to save this base, or do you want to keep asking questions?" Williams leaned close to Johnson, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I just remembered something. 3 years ago there was a briefing about next-generation cyber defense protocols being developed by a joint task force. The project lead was described as a prodigy, recruited directly from Stanford at 19 years old. Youngest officer ever commissioned into Naval Cyber Warfare Command. Johnson stared at Maya Chen with new understanding. The woman Morrison was publicly searching and humiliating at the checkpoint is apparently the person who designed most of our electronic defense systems, sir. In the shelter, Maya was already providing detailed instructions to Captain Morrison, her voice calm and precise, as she walked him through the activation of defensive systems that most personnel didn't know existed. Protocol 00 Alpha requires physical access to the main electrical distribution center and simultaneous activation of 3 separate backup systems. I need teams at Junction Alpha Junction Bravo and the auxiliary power facility. Each team will receive separate instructions that must be executed within a 30-second window. As she coordinated the base's defense from a civilian shelter using equipment she had helped design, Maya Chen proved that the staff sergeant who had publicly humiliated her at the checkpoint had made the worst mistake of his career. He had dismissed her as irrelevant. He had treated her as a threat. And he had never once considered that the young woman in the Stanford hoodie might be the only person capable of saving everyone on the largest naval base in the world. Outside the shelter, the sounds of combat grew closer. The real battle for Norfolk Naval Base was about to begin. The radio in Maya's hand crackled with desperate transmissions from across the base as she coordinated defensive operations from Shelter Alpha 9. Junction Alpha reporting. We're in position but taking fire from the East Corridor. Junction Bravo here. Hostile forces have established a blocking position between us and the auxiliary power facility. Base operations, this is the main gate. We've lost visual on at least 12 hostiles who breached the perimeter 3 minutes ago. They're somewhere inside the administrative complex. Maya processed each transmission while simultaneously calculating tactical solutions. Her mind worked like a computer, sorting threats by priority, allocating resources, identifying vulnerabilities in the enemy's approach. Junction Alpha hold position and maintain suppressive fire. Junction Bravo reroute through maintenance tunnel Charlie 7. It connects to auxiliary power from the basement level. Main gate, your 12 hostiles are heading toward the communication center. Intercept them at Corridor Junction Delta 4. Johnson watched her work with growing amazement. She wasn't just coordinating a defense. She was conducting a symphony of military operations, anticipating enemy movements before they happened, positioning defenders in locations that maximized their effectiveness. "How is she doing this?" Morrison whispered to Williams, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Williams didn't take his eyes off Maya. "Because she designed the base's defensive architecture, Sergeant. She knows every corridor, every junction, every choke point. She built the system these people are trying to destroy." The radio erupted with a new transmission, this one carrying unmistakable urgency. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Captain Morrison at Base Operations. Ma'am, we have a critical situation developing. The USS Constitution is conducting weapons testing 12 miles offshore. They've lost control of a test missile." Maya's hand tightened on the radio. "Say again, Captain." "Ma'am, the missile's guidance system was compromised by the same cyber attack affecting the base. It's currently on an intercept course with Norfolk. Estimated time to impact is 4 minutes and 40 seconds. The words hit the shelter like a physical shockwave. 37 civilians who had been quietly praying for rescue suddenly understood that their situation had become exponentially worse. A runaway missile heading toward the largest naval base in the world would cause catastrophic destruction. Maya's voice remained steady, but Johnson could see the tension in her jaw, the slight narrowing of her eyes as she processed this new threat. "Captain, what defensive systems do we have operational?" "Ma'am, the CIWS systems are partially functional, but computer-assisted targeting is completely down. Manual operation requires direct line of sight and specialized training that most of our current personnel don't have." "Who's manning the CIWS control center?" "Petty Officer Chen, ma'am. He's ready to implement any orders, but he's never performed manual targeting outside of simulation exercises." Maya closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When she opened them, Her expression had shifted into something that Williams recognized immediately, the look of a commander who had just accepted responsibility for an impossible task. "Patch me through to Petty Officer Chen directly." "Yes, ma'am. You're connected." A new voice came through the radio, young and frightened. "Lieutenant Commander, this is Petty Officer Chen at CIWS Control. Ma'am, I want to help, but manual targeting requires calculations that aren't in our standard training protocols." Petty Officer Chen, listen to me carefully. I'm going to talk you through manual targeting procedures that aren't in any training manual you've ever seen. These are classified protocols that I developed specifically for scenarios where electronic guidance systems are compromised. "Ma'am, how do you know these procedures?" "Because I designed the CIWS targeting algorithms, Petty Officer. Now, do you have a functioning terminal?" "Yes, ma'am. Emergency backup power is holding." "Good. I need you to access the manual override interface. The access code is 77 Alpha Tango 99 Echo. Can you confirm you're in?" There was a pause. Then Chen's voice returned with audible relief. "Confirmed, ma'am. I'm seeing the manual targeting interface." "Outstanding. Now the incoming missile will be approaching from bearing 275 at approximately Mach 0.8. I need you to input the following frequency modulation parameters for the targeting system." Maya began rattling off numbers and specifications with machine-like precision. Her voice never wavered, never hesitated, each instruction delivered with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Williams found himself holding his breath as he listened. The young woman who had been publicly humiliated at the checkpoint less than 30 minutes ago was now talking a frightened petty officer through procedures that would determine whether hundreds of people lived or died. "Lieutenant Commander," Chen's voice came back through the radio. "I have manual lock on the incoming missile. Intercept confidence is showing 87%. "That's not good enough, Petty Officer. Adjust your vertical tracking by 0.3 degrees and increase your rate of fire calculation by 12%. A pause. "Ma'am, those adjustments aren't in the standard parameters." "I know. I'm giving you parameters that account for the specific characteristics of the missile type the Constitution was testing. Trust me, Petty Officer." Another pause, longer this time. Then Chen's voice returned stronger now. "Adjustments made. Intercept confidence is showing 94%. Execute intercept procedures. Now." Through the shelter's reinforced walls, they could hear the distant thunder of the CIWS systems engaging. The rapid-fire bark of the close-in weapon systems filled the air for approximately 8 seconds. Then silence. The radio crackled. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is base operations. Missile intercept successful. Repeat, incoming missile has been neutralized." A cheer erupted from the security personnel in the shelter. Several tourists began crying with relief. Morrison slumped against the wall, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. But Maya didn't celebrate. Her expression remained focused, intense, already calculating the next phase of the crisis. Base operations, the missile intercept was necessary but insufficient. The source of this attack is still operational. What's the status of the hostile vessel offshore? "Ma'am, we're tracking a modified cargo ship approximately 12 miles out. Electronic warfare emissions are still active. They appear to be coordinating with ground forces inside the base." "How many ground forces are we dealing with?" "Best estimate is 40 to 45 hostiles in 4 separate groups. They're positioned around the communications center, the fuel depot, the ammunition storage facility, and the main administrative building." Maya's jaw tightened. The attackers weren't conducting a random assault. They were systematically targeting the most critical infrastructure on the base. Someone had provided them with detailed intelligence about Norfolk's layout and vulnerabilities. "Captain Morrison, I need you to implement Protocol 99 Charlie immediately. That will activate secondary command structure and give us distributed control if your operations center is compromised." "Lieutenant Commander, Protocol 99 Charlie requires flag officer authorization." "Captain, I am a flag officer." "Lieutenant Commander, Naval Cyber Warfare Command with direct authorization from ComNav Base Norfolk. My commission was signed by the Chief of Naval Operations personally. Is that sufficient authority? The silence on the radio lasted 3 seconds. Yes, ma'am. Implementing Protocol 99 Charlie now. Johnson approached Maya's position, his voice low enough that the civilians couldn't hear. Lieutenant Commander, permission to speak freely. Maya glanced at him. Go ahead. Ma'am, how did you know this attack was coming? You were carrying signal detection equipment. You detected the electronic interference before our base systems. That's not coincidence. Maya studied his face for a long moment, evaluating whether he could be trusted with information that she had been carefully protecting. Petty Officer Johnson, I've been conducting an unofficial investigation for the past 6 months. Someone with access to classified defensive technologies has been systematically leaking information to hostile foreign actors. The attack patterns, the timing, the specific systems being targeted. They all point to an inside source. You were investigating a mole. I was investigating a traitor petty officer, someone who has been selling American defensive secrets to our enemies. And today's attack proves that my investigation was correct. The implication sent a chill through Johnson's spine. If Maya was right, the attack on Norfolk wasn't just a military assault. It was the culmination of a long-term espionage operation that had compromised some of America's most sensitive technologies. Do you know who the traitor is? Maya's expression hardened. I have suspicions. But suspicions aren't evidence, and right now we need to focus on surviving this attack before we can worry about identifying who made it possible. The radio interrupted their conversation with another urgent transmission. Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Captain Morrison. Ma'am, we have a new problem. The hostile forces near the ammunition storage facility are attempting to breach the perimeter, if they gain access to our munitions. Understood, Captain. How many defenders do we have in that sector? 6 personnel, ma'am. They're holding, but they're taking heavy fire and running low on ammunition. Maya's mind raced through tactical options. The ammunition storage facility was one of the most critical targets on the base. If the attackers gained access to military munitions, they could cause destruction that would make the intercepted missile look like a firecracker. Captain, I need you to redirect the quick reaction force from Sector 7 to reinforce the ammunition storage perimeter, and I need you to do it in the next 90 seconds. Ma'am, Sector 7 is providing security for the communications center. The communications center is already compromised, Captain. Our electronic systems are useless until we eliminate the source of the jamming. The ammunition storage facility is the priority. There was hesitation in Morrison's voice when he responded. Lieutenant Commander, that's a significant tactical decision. Are you certain, Captain Morrison? Maya's voice carried steel that made everyone in the shelter straighten unconsciously. I have been planning defensive scenarios for Norfolk Naval Base since I was 19 years old. I know the vulnerabilities of this installation better than anyone alive. If those attackers reach the ammunition storage facility, we lose the ability to mount any kind of effective resistance. Redirect the quick reaction force, now. Yes, ma'am. QRF is moving. Williams moved closer to Maya's position. Lieutenant Commander, may I ask you something? Make it quick, Chief. Ma'am, you said you've been planning defensive scenarios since you were 19. How old are you now? 24, Chief. Williams did the math in his head. 5 years of planning, developing, and implementing defensive systems for one of the most important naval installations in the world. 5 years of work that was now being tested by an enemy who had somehow acquired detailed knowledge of everything she had created. Ma'am, whoever is behind this attack, they didn't just steal your technologies, they're using them against you personally. Maya's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. I know, Chief. Believe me, I know. The shelter shook as an explosion detonated somewhere nearby. Not close enough to breach their defenses, but close enough to remind everyone that the battle for Norfolk was far from over. Lieutenant Commander. A new voice came through the radio, younger and more urgent than Captain Morrison's. This is Petty Officer Davis at the fuel depot. Ma'am, we have a critical situation. Hostile forces have planted explosive devices on the main fuel storage tanks. We can see the timers. They're showing less than 5 minutes. Maya's blood ran cold. The fuel depot contained enough aviation fuel and diesel to power the entire base for weeks. If those tanks exploded, the resulting fireball would destroy everything within a quarter-mile radius and ignite secondary fires that could burn for days. Petty Officer Davis, how many hostiles are guarding the explosives? 8 that we can see, ma'am. Maybe more in concealed positions. And how many defenders do you have? 4, ma'am, 2 are wounded. Impossible odds. 2 effective defenders against at least 8 hostiles with less than 5 minutes to reach and disarm explosives that had been placed by professionals. Petty Officer Davis, listen to me very carefully. The explosives they're using are almost certainly military-grade C4 with electronic detonators. Those detonators are vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. If you can generate a localized EMP burst, you can disable the timers without having to physically reach the devices. Ma'am, we don't have EMP capability at the fuel depot. Yes, you do. There's an emergency generator in the maintenance shed approximately 40 meters from your position. If you overload the generator's capacitor bank and create a controlled short circuit, you'll generate enough electromagnetic interference to disable any electronic detonators within a 100-meter radius. Davis's voice came back uncertain. Ma'am, that sounds like it could also start a fire. It could, but a controlled electrical fire is survivable. A fuel depot explosion is not. You have 4 minutes. Move. The radio went silent as Davis and his remaining defenders attempted the desperate maneuver Maya had described. Everyone in the shelter waited, barely breathing, for confirmation that the fuel depot had been saved. 3 minutes passed. Then 4. The radio crackled back to life. Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Petty Officer Davis. Ma'am, the EMP worked. Explosive timers are showing all zeros. The detonators are dead. Another wave of relief swept through the shelter. But Maya's expression remained focused, calculating. Outstanding work, Petty Officer. Now I need you to secure those explosives and prepare to defend your position. The hostiles who planted those devices will not be happy that their plan failed. Understood, ma'am. Davis out. Johnson shook his head slowly. Lieutenant Commander, how did you know about the generator? How did you know the explosives would be vulnerable to EMP? Maya turned to face him, and for the first time he saw exhaustion behind her eyes. The weight of coordinating an entire base's defense while simultaneously managing multiple crises was taking its toll even on someone as capable as she was. Petty Officer Johnson, I spent 3 years designing Norfolk's defensive infrastructure. Every emergency generator, every backup system, every potential vulnerability. I know where every piece of equipment is located because I decided where it should be placed. She paused, her voice dropping slightly. And I know how to disable military explosives because I helped develop the countermeasures that our forces use against enemy IEDs. The people attacking this base are using techniques that I created. They're using my work against me. The personal nature of the attack was becoming increasingly clear. Whoever had orchestrated this assault hadn't just acquired classified information. They had specifically targeted Maya's contributions to American defense, turning her life's work into a weapon against the very installation she had dedicated herself to protecting. Lieutenant Commander. Captain Morrison's voice came through the radio again. Ma'am, we've successfully reinforced the ammunition storage facility. Hostile forces are withdrawing from that sector. But we have a new development. Report, Captain. Ma'am, the hostile vessel offshore is showing increased electronic activity. Our sensors indicate they're preparing for something. We don't know what. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. The attackers had failed to destroy the ammunition storage. They had failed to ignite the fuel depot. They had failed to take down the base with their initial cyber assault. Whatever they were planning next would be their final attempt. Captain, I need you to implement Pursuit Protocol Charlie 77 immediately. Ma'am, I'm not familiar with that protocol. It's classified above your clearance level, Captain, but right now I'm authorizing its use. Pursuit Protocol Charlie 77 will give us offensive capability against that vessel. There was a long pause. Lieutenant Commander, are you saying we have offensive systems I don't know about? Maya allowed herself a small, cold smile. Captain Morrison, every defensive system I designed includes corresponding offensive capabilities. The people on that ship have been attacking Norfolk using technologies I created. They're about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. She began providing detailed instructions for activating systems that most Navy personnel had never heard of. Hidden capabilities that had been built into Norfolk's infrastructure years ago, waiting for exactly this scenario. As she worked, Williams approached with a question that had been bothering him since the crisis began. Lieutenant Commander, may I ask you something personal? Go ahead, Chief. Ma'am, when you came through that checkpoint this morning, when Sergeant Morrison was searching you, humiliating you in front of all those people, why didn't you just identify yourself? Why didn't you tell him who you were? Maya paused in her work, her expression thoughtful. Chief Williams, I was conducting an undercover investigation into potential security breaches at this installation. If I had identified myself, I would have compromised 6 months of intelligence work. I would have alerted the traitor I've been hunting that I was getting close. She glanced toward Morrison, who was standing near the shelter's entrance, with his head bowed. Besides, Chief, the way Sergeant Morrison treated me told me something important about the security culture at this checkpoint. His behavior wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of deeper problems that need to be addressed. Williams nodded slowly, understanding her point. Maya's willingness to endure public humiliation rather than compromise her investigation demonstrated the kind of dedication that separated exceptional officers from ordinary ones. Lieutenant Commander Chen, Captain Morrison's voice came through the radio with new urgency. Ma'am, Pursuit Protocol Charlie 77 is locked on to the hostile vessel. We have a firing solution and await your command to engage. Maya moved to the communications console, her hand hovering over the transmission key. The decision to authorize offensive action against the source vessel would escalate the confrontation beyond defensive measures. But if the vessel continued its electronic warfare assault, Norfolk would remain vulnerable to further attacks. Captain Morrison confirmed that the target vessel is actively engaging this installation with hostile electronic warfare. Confirmed, Lieutenant Commander. The vessel is maintaining electronic assault and appears to be coordinating with remaining ground forces. Maya took a breath. This was the moment. Everything she had built, everything she had designed, everything she had sacrificed, it all came down to this decision. Base operations, you are authorized to engage target vessel with Pursuit Protocol Charlie 77. Execute immediately. Understood, Lieutenant Commander. Engaging now. Through the shelter's walls, they could hear the distant sounds of Norfolk's hidden offensive systems coming to life. Weapons that had been dormant for years, waiting for exactly this moment, finally unleashing their capabilities against an enemy who had made the mistake of underestimating American defensive technologies. The radio crackled with status reports as the engagement unfolded. Target vessel showing critical damage. Electronic warfare emissions are decreasing. Hostile vessel is attempting to withdraw. Secondary explosions observed on target. Then, finally, the report everyone had been waiting for. Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is base operations. Target vessel has been neutralized. Electronic warfare assault has ceased completely. Norfolk Naval Base communications are being restored. The shelter erupted in celebration. Tourists who had been terrified for their lives embraced each other with tears of relief. Security personnel shook hands and clapped shoulders. Even Morrison managed a weak smile, though his eyes kept returning to Maya with an expression of profound shame. But Maya didn't celebrate. Her work wasn't finished. Captain Morrison, what's the status of hostile ground forces? Ma'am, with communications restored, we're tracking approximately 28 remaining hostiles. They appear to be attempting to withdraw to predetermined extraction points. Negative, Captain. Do not allow hostile forces to withdraw. Implement Containment Protocol Delta and secure all personnel for intelligence assessment. Understood, Lieutenant Commander. Containment Protocol Delta is being implemented. Maya turned away from the radio and faced the group of people who had shared this crisis with her. Her expression was calm, controlled, but Williams could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The weight of command, even temporary command, was enormous. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, addressing the tourists for the first time since the crisis began, "the immediate threat has been neutralized. You will be escorted to a secure area where you can contact family members and receive medical attention if needed. I want to thank you for your cooperation during what has been an extremely difficult situation." An elderly man near the back of the group raised his hand. "Ma'am, I served in Vietnam. 53 years in this country, and I've never seen anything like what you just did. Who are you?" Maya met his eyes directly. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen, sir, Naval Cyber Warfare Command, and I'm the person who designed the systems that just saved this base." The old veteran nodded slowly, then raised his hand to his forehead in a crisp salute. One by one, the other veterans in the group followed suit. 4 men who had served their country in different wars, different eras, all recognizing the same quality in this young woman that they had seen in the finest officers of their own service. Maya returned the salute with precise military courtesy. Morrison watched this exchange from his position near the entrance. His face was a battlefield of conflicting emotions: shame for how he had treated her, awe at what she had accomplished, and something else that Williams recognized immediately: fear. Because Morrison understood something that the celebrating tourists and relieved security personnel did not. Maya Chen hadn't just defended Norfolk Naval Base. She had also been conducting an investigation into a traitor with access to classified information. And the scope of that investigation was about to expand dramatically. The celebration in Shelter Alpha 9 lasted exactly 47 seconds before Maya's radio crackled with a transmission that silenced every voice in the room. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Captain Morrison at Base Operations. Ma'am, we've recovered documents and electronic devices from the captured hostile forces. You need to see this immediately. The intelligence they were carrying? Ma'am, it's comprehensive. Technical specifications for systems that match your classified protocols exactly." Maya's expression shifted from exhausted relief to cold focus. "Captain, secure all recovered materials. I'm on my way to the operations center now." "Understood, ma'am. But Lieutenant Commander, there's something else. The documents include operational schedules, deployment patterns, security rotation times. This wasn't just stolen technical data. Someone gave them real-time intelligence about our defensive posture." The implications hit everyone in the shelter simultaneously. The attack on Norfolk hadn't been planned using old information or outdated intelligence. Someone inside the base had been actively providing updates to the enemy, coordinating the assault from within American ranks. Maya turned to Johnson. "Petty Officer, I need you to escort these civilians to the designated reception area. Chief Williams, you're with me." Williams straightened immediately. "Yes, ma'am." Morrison stepped forward, his face a mixture of shame and desperation. "Lieutenant Commander, I want to help. Whatever you need. After this morning, I need to make this right." Maya studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Sergeant Morrison, right now the best thing you can do is your job. Get these people to safety. We'll discuss this morning's events later." It was a dismissal, but not a cruel one. Morrison nodded and turned to organize the civilian evacuation, his shoulders carrying the weight of his earlier behavior like a physical burden. Maya and Williams moved through corridors that were slowly returning to normal operations. Emergency lighting had been replaced by standard illumination. Electronic systems were rebooting. Personnel moved with purpose rather than panic. But the damage from the attack was visible everywhere. Scorched walls from firefights, shattered glass from breached security stations, the acrid smell of electrical fires that had been extinguished but not forgotten. "Lieutenant Commander," and Williams kept his voice low as they walked. "May I speak candidly?" "Go ahead, Chief." "Ma'am, you mentioned you've been investigating a potential traitor for 6 months. If the hostile forces had real-time intelligence about our operations, that means your investigation was correct. But it also means the traitor knows you're hunting them." "I'm aware of that, Chief." "Ma'am, that makes you a target." Maya's jaw tightened slightly. "I've been a target since the moment I started asking questions that made certain people uncomfortable. Today's attack wasn't just about damaging Norfolk's infrastructure. It was about sending a message." "What kind of message?" "That whoever is selling American secrets has powerful friends. Friends who are willing to launch a military assault on the largest naval base in the world just to prove a point." They reached the base operations center, where the aftermath of crisis management filled every available space. Personnel rushed between stations coordinating recovery operations and processing intelligence from captured hostiles. Captain Morrison, a graying officer in his 50s, met them at the entrance. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," he saluted crisply. "Ma'am, I've secured the recovered materials in the intelligence analysis room, but before you review them, there's something you need to know." "Report, Captain." Morrison's expression was troubled. "Ma'am, among the documents recovered from the hostile forces, we found personnel files, detailed background information on key Norfolk staff members, but one file was different from the others, more comprehensive, more personal." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Whose file?" "Yours, ma'am. They had everything. Your recruitment from Stanford, your commission details, your work on defensive protocols, even your investigation into potential security breaches." Morrison paused, his voice dropping. "Lieutenant Commander, they knew you would be here today. They knew which checkpoint you would enter through. They knew you would be carrying signal detection equipment." The revelation struck Maya like a physical blow. The attack hadn't just been coordinated using stolen technologies. It had been specifically timed to coincide with her undercover visit. Someone wanted her to witness the destruction of her life's work. Someone wanted her to understand exactly how thoroughly her own creations had been compromised. "Show me everything, Captain." The intelligence analysis room was cramped, filled with evidence bags and electronic devices arranged on examination tables. 2 intelligence analysts were already cataloging recovered materials, their faces grim, as they processed the scope of the security breach. Maya approached the central table where documents had been arranged in chronological order. Technical specifications for CIWS targeting systems, schematics for the base's emergency power distribution, detailed maps of underground maintenance tunnels, protocol descriptions for defensive systems that were classified at the highest levels. "This is my work." Maya's voice was quiet, controlled, but Williams could hear the pain beneath her professional composure. "These are systems I designed to protect American installations, and someone has been selling them to our enemies." She picked up a document that showed the activation sequence for Protocol 00 Alpha, the hidden defensive system she had used to restore Norfolk's capabilities during the attack. The very existence of that protocol was known to only 3 people in the entire Navy. "Lieutenant Commander," one of the intelligence analysts approached with a tablet. "Ma'am, we've been analyzing the communication patterns from the hostile vessel before it was neutralized. The ship was receiving encrypted transmissions from somewhere on this base throughout the entire attack." "Can you trace the source?" "Partially, ma'am. The transmissions originated from the administrative complex, but they were routed through multiple relay points to disguise the exact location. Whoever was sending them knew our tracking capabilities and how to evade them." Maya processed this information while continuing to examine the recovered documents. The traitor wasn't just someone with access to classified information. It was someone who understood the full scope of Norfolk's surveillance systems and knew exactly how to avoid detection. Chief Williams. She turned to face him directly. I need you to think back to everyone you've seen accessing restricted areas over the past 6 months. Anyone whose behavior seemed unusual. Anyone who asked questions that seemed inappropriate for their position. Williams considered the question carefully. Ma'am, there's always personnel moving through restricted areas. Officers, maintenance crews, civilian contractors. But now that you mention it, there was one person who seemed to appear in places where they had no obvious reason to be. Who? Before Williams could answer, the operations center door burst open. A young ensign rushed in his face, pale with urgency. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Commander Chen. We have a situation at the detention facility. One of the captured hostiles is requesting to speak with the commanding officer. He says he has information about the person who hired them. Maya exchanged a glance with Williams. Take me to him. The detention facility was a temporary holding area that had been established in one of the base's secure buildings. Captured hostiles sat in individual cells, guarded by armed personnel who had received strict orders about communication protocols. The man requesting to speak was in his 40s, with the weathered features of someone who had spent years in harsh environments. His tactical gear had been removed, but his bearing still carried the unmistakable confidence of a professional military operator. You're the one who coordinated the defense. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as Maya approached his cell. I watched the whole thing fall apart. Missile intercept, fuel depot save, the counterattack on our ship. Impressive work for someone so young. You wanted to talk. Talk. The man smiled slightly. Direct. I respect that. My name is Marcus Webb, former Special Forces, now private military contractor working for whoever pays the highest rate. I'm not interested in your resume, Mr. Webb. You said you have information about who hired you. I do, but information has value, Lieutenant Commander. I'm sure you understand that better than most people. Maya studied him with cold assessment. You're in custody for participating in a military assault on a United States naval installation. That's terrorism, Mr. Webb. You're looking at federal prosecution, possible death penalty. What could you possibly want that would be worth the information you're offering? Webb leaned forward slightly. Immunity, full protection, and relocation to a country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. That's a significant ask. The information I have is significant. The person who hired us isn't some foreign agent or enemy operative. They're American, military, and they're currently standing about 50 feet from where we're having this conversation. Maya felt her blood turn to ice. You're saying the traitor is here? In this building? Right now? I'm saying the person who paid us $2 million to attack Norfolk Naval Base is someone you've probably met. Someone who shook your hand and smiled while planning to destroy everything you've built. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a detonation. Maya's mind raced through the personnel she had encountered since arriving at Norfolk. Captain Morrison at base operations, the intelligence analysts reviewing recovered materials, the security personnel who had helped coordinate the defense. Give me a name. Webb shook his head slowly. Not until I have guarantees in writing. I've seen what happens to people who cross this particular individual. They have reach, Lieutenant Commander. Influence, the kind of connections that can make problems disappear, including people who become inconvenient. Maya stepped closer to the cell, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Mr. Webb, you just participated in an attack that nearly killed hundreds of American military personnel and civilians. You're not in a position to negotiate. Give me the name, or I will personally ensure that you spend the rest of your life in a federal supermax facility where the only human contact you'll have is with guards who won't speak to you. Something flickered in Webb's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of someone whose will matched his own. The communications we received during the attack came from someone using the call sign Phoenix. We never met face to face. All coordination was done through encrypted channels, but during our final briefing, Phoenix let something slip. A detail that didn't match our intelligence package. What detail? Phoenix mentioned that the base's new cyber defense protocols had a vulnerability in the tertiary backup systems, a flaw that hadn't been documented in any of the materials we received. Phoenix said they had personally verified this vulnerability during a recent inspection. Maya's expression didn't change, but Williams could see the tension in her shoulders. The information Webb was providing was specific enough to be credible, but vague enough to implicate dozens of potential suspects. How many people have conducted inspections of Norfolk's cyber defense systems in the past year? That's the question you need to answer, Lieutenant Commander. But I can tell you this much. Phoenix isn't just selling information. They're building something. A network of compromised installations across the Pacific Fleet. Norfolk was supposed to be the proof of concept, the demonstration that would attract bigger buyers and bigger contracts. The scope of the conspiracy was larger than Maya had imagined. This wasn't a single traitor selling secrets for personal profit. It was a systematic operation to compromise American defensive capabilities across an entire theater of operations. Mr. Webb, if what you're saying is true, you're describing one of the most significant security breaches in American military history. I know exactly what I'm describing, Lieutenant Commander. That's why I want immunity, because the person behind this operation doesn't leave loose ends. And right now I'm the loosest end there is. Maya turned away from the cell, her mind processing the implications of Webb's revelations. The traitor codenamed Phoenix had access to Norfolk's most classified systems. They had conducted inspections that gave them first-hand knowledge of vulnerabilities, and they were currently somewhere on the base watching the aftermath of their failed operation unfold. Chief Williams. Maya's voice was low and tense. I need a complete list of everyone who has conducted cyber defense inspections at Norfolk in the past 12 months. Every officer, every civilian contractor, every consultant. Anyone who had access to the tertiary backup systems. Yes, ma'am. But Lieutenant Commander, that list could include dozens of names. Then we start eliminating them one by one. Someone on that list is Phoenix. Someone on that list tried to destroy this base and kill everyone on it. And I am going to find them. They returned to the intelligence analysis room, where the recovered documents had been fully cataloged and organized. Maya began reviewing the inspection logs, cross-referencing names with access records and security clearances. The list was longer than she had hoped. 18 individuals had conducted cyber defense inspections at Norfolk in the relevant time frame. 12 were military officers ranging from lieutenant to captain. 4 were civilian contractors with top-secret clearances. 2 were consultants from defense technology companies. Lieutenant Commander? One of the intelligence analysts approached with a tablet showing communication intercepts. Ma'am, we've managed to partially decrypt some of the transmissions between the hostile vessel and the base. Most of it is operational coordination, but there's one message that stands out. Maya took the tablet and read the decrypted text. Her face went pale. Phoenix to Vessel Command. Target Chen has arrived at VCC Alpha. Checkpoint personnel have detained her as planned. Proceed with Phase 2. Ensure she witnesses the destruction of her systems before elimination. The attack hadn't just been timed to coincide with her visit. It had been specifically designed to humiliate her first, then kill her. Someone had orchestrated the entire confrontation at the checkpoint, ensuring that Maya would be publicly searched and shamed before watching Norfolk burn around her. They wanted me to see it. Maya's voice was barely audible. They wanted me to watch everything I built get destroyed, and then they were going to make sure I didn't survive to rebuild. Williams read the message over her shoulder, his weathered face hardening with anger. Ma'am, this confirms that Phoenix knew your exact schedule, your route through the checkpoint, your equipment. This level of surveillance requires someone with direct access to your personal information. Maya's mind raced through the possibilities. Who had known about her undercover visit to Norfolk? Who had access to her schedule, her investigation files, her operational plans? The answer hit her like a physical blow. Chief Williams, who approved my security credentials for today's visit. Williams checked his records. Ma'am, your credentials were approved through the base commander's office. Standard protocol for classified investigations. And who in the base commander's office would have had access to my detailed schedule? That would be... Ma'am, that would be Commander Harrison's executive assistant, Lieutenant Commander David Foster. Maya felt the pieces clicking into place with terrible certainty. David Foster. A rising star in Navy intelligence circles. A man with access to the highest levels of classified information. A man who had been present during multiple cyber defense inspections over the past 2 years. A man who had personally welcomed Maya to Norfolk when she arrived 6 months ago to begin her investigation. Lieutenant Commander Foster was one of the first people I briefed on my investigation. Maya's voice was flat controlled, betraying none of the fury building inside her. I shared my preliminary findings with him. I trusted him. Williams understood immediately. Ma'am, if Foster is Phoenix, then he's known about your investigation from the beginning. He's been using your own intelligence to stay ahead of you. And he's been feeding information to our enemies while I've been hunting a ghost that he created. Maya's jaw tightened. Where is Lieutenant Commander Foster right now? Williams contacted base security. The response came back within 30 seconds, and the words made Maya's blood run cold. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Foster left the base operations center approximately 15 minutes ago. He said he was going to coordinate recovery operations at the communications center. But security cameras show him heading toward the helicopter pad. He's running. Maya grabbed her radio. All stations, this is Lieutenant Commander Chen. Initiate base lockdown immediately. No aircraft are authorized for departure. I need security teams at all helicopter pads and vehicle checkpoints. Subject is Lieutenant Commander David Foster. Consider him armed and dangerous. The response came back within seconds. Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is air operations. Ma'am, we have one helicopter that just lifted off from Pad Charlie. Pilot identification shows Lieutenant Commander Foster filed an emergency medical evacuation flight plan. Shoot it down. There was a pause on the radio. Ma'am, we can't fire on a Navy aircraft without confirmation of hostile intent. Maya grabbed the radio with both hands, her voice carrying every ounce of authority she possessed. Air operations, that helicopter is carrying a traitor who sold American defensive secrets to our enemies. A traitor who orchestrated today's attack. A traitor who tried to kill everyone on this base. You will disable that aircraft immediately, or I will personally ensure that everyone in your chain of command faces court-martial for aiding an enemy of the United States. Another pause. Then a different voice came on the radio, older and more authoritative. Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Admiral Harrison. I've been monitoring the situation from my command post. Your request to disable the helicopter is authorized. Air operations engage the target immediately. The sounds of pursuit helicopters scrambling filled the air as Norfolk's remaining aircraft assets moved to intercept Foster's escape vehicle. Maya listened to the tactical communications with growing tension. Target helicopter is heading northeast at maximum speed. Intercept aircraft are closing. Target is attempting evasive maneuvers. He's heading toward civilian airspace. Warning shots fired. Target is not responding to commands to land. Target helicopter is losing altitude. Appears to be experiencing engine difficulties. Confirm target helicopter is down. Crash site approximately 3 miles northeast of the base. Emergency response teams are en route. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to process what had just happened. The man she had trusted with her investigation. The man who had smiled and offered encouragement while secretly plotting her destruction. The man who had sold American secrets to foreign enemies. That man was now face down in a crashed helicopter. His escape attempt ended by the very military he had betrayed. Lieutenant Commander, Admiral Harrison's voice came through the radio. I need you at the operations center immediately. We have a lot to discuss. Maya straightened her shoulders, pushed down the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her, and prepared to face the aftermath of the worst security breach in Pacific Fleet history. On my way, Admiral. As she walked toward the operations center, Williams fell into step beside her. Ma'am, if I may say so, you handled that situation with remarkable composure. Not many officers could coordinate a base defense and identify a traitor while being personally targeted for assassination. Maya didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried a weight that seemed too heavy for her 24 years. Chief Williams David Foster was my mentor. He recruited me from Stanford. He sponsored my commission. He told me I had the potential to be one of the finest officers in the Navy. She paused, her eyes reflecting pain that she had been suppressing throughout the crisis. And the whole time he was using me, studying my work so he could sell it, guiding my investigation so he could stay ahead of it. Everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. Williams nodded slowly, understanding the depth of betrayal she was processing. Ma'am, the fact that he fooled you says nothing about your abilities. It says everything about how dangerous he was. And you caught him anyway. I caught him because he got greedy. Because he couldn't resist making today's attack personal. If he had just let me go through the checkpoint normally, if he hadn't orchestrated that public humiliation, I might never have been suspicious enough to piece it together. They reached the operations center, where Admiral Harrison waited with a cluster of senior officers. The Admiral was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and the weathered features of someone who had spent decades in service. Lieutenant Commander Chen, Harrison's voice carried respect that had been earned over the past few hours. You saved this base. You identified a traitor who had evaded detection for years, and you did it while being personally targeted for elimination. That's the kind of performance that earns recognition. Maya saluted crisply. Thank you, Admiral. But with respect, the work isn't finished. Foster may have been the source of our intelligence leak, but the network he built is still out there. The buyers he cultivated, the systems he compromised at other installations. We need to assess the full scope of the damage. Harrison nodded slowly. You're right, Lieutenant Commander. This investigation is just beginning, and I want you to lead it. The offer was unexpected. Maya had assumed she would be debriefed, commended, and sent back to her regular duties. Leading a fleet-wide investigation into a security breach of this magnitude was a career-defining assignment. Admiral, I'm honored, but I should point out that my previous investigation was compromised from the start. Foster knew everything I was doing. How can you be sure my judgment is reliable? Harrison's expression softened slightly. Lieutenant Commander Foster fooled a lot of people. Senior officers with decades more experience than you have. Intelligence professionals whose entire careers have been built on identifying threats. The fact that you caught him at all under impossible circumstances tells me everything I need to know about your judgment. Maya absorbed his words, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. The investigation that lay ahead would be massive in scope, politically sensitive, and personally painful. She would be examining the wreckage of a betrayal that had cut her to the core. But she would also be protecting the installations and personnel that depended on defensive systems she had created. She would be ensuring that Foster's treachery couldn't be repeated by others who might be tempted to follow his path. I accept, Admiral. When do I start? Harrison glanced at his watch. You've been awake for approximately 18 hours, Lieutenant Commander. Most of that time was spent coordinating a base defense and conducting an intelligence operation under combat conditions. You start tomorrow. Tonight you rest. With respect, Admiral, there's too much work to be done. Every hour we delay is an hour that compromised systems remain vulnerable. Lieutenant Commander, Harrison's voice carried a note of paternal authority. That's an order. Rest tonight. The investigation will still be here tomorrow. And you'll be more effective if you're not running on adrenaline and determination alone. Maya wanted to argue, but she recognized the wisdom in his words. The exhaustion she had been suppressing was becoming impossible to ignore. Her hands were trembling slightly. Her thoughts were beginning to fragment around the edges. "Yes, Admiral." As she turned to leave, Harrison called after her. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, one more thing." Maya turned back. "Sir?" "The way you handled yourself today, the poise under pressure, the tactical brilliance, the personal courage." Harrison paused, his expression carrying something that looked almost like pride. "Your father would have been proud." The words hit Maya with unexpected force. Her father, the Navy communications specialist, whose equipment she had been carrying. The man whose memory had brought her to Norfolk in the first place. The man who had died in service before he could see what his daughter would become. "Thank you, Admiral. That means more than you know." She walked out of the operations center into a base that was slowly returning to normal. Personnel were clearing debris. Electronic systems were coming back online. The sounds of reconstruction were replacing the sounds of crisis. Maya Chen had arrived at Norfolk as an undercover investigator, being publicly humiliated at a security checkpoint. She was leaving as the officer who had saved the base and exposed one of the worst traitors in American military history. But as she made her way toward the temporary quarters that had been assigned to her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were just beginning. Foster was gone, but the network he had built remained. The buyers he had cultivated were still out there, and somewhere in the vast machinery of the American military, other potential traitors were watching and learning from his mistakes. The battle for Norfolk was over. The war for American security was just beginning. Maya didn't sleep that night. Admiral Harrison had ordered rest, but her mind refused to quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David Foster's face, the warm smile he had given her during their first meeting at Stanford, the encouraging words he had offered when she doubted herself, the pride in his voice when he told her she was destined for greatness. All of it lies. Every moment, every word, every gesture of support. At 0347, she gave up trying and made her way to the intelligence analysis room. The recovered documents were still spread across the examination tables, waiting for the deeper investigation that would begin in the morning. But Maya couldn't wait. The questions burning in her mind demanded immediate answers. She started with Foster's personnel file. His career had been exemplary. Naval Academy graduate. Top of his class in intelligence training. Rapid promotions through the ranks. Commendations for exceptional service. Nothing in his official record suggested the capacity for betrayal on this scale. But the financial records told a different story. Maya cross-referenced Foster's bank statements with the timeline of intelligence leaks she had been investigating. The correlation was damning. Large deposits appeared within days of each suspected breach, money flowing from offshore accounts that had been carefully designed to avoid detection. $2 million. That was the price David Foster had put on American security. $2 million to sell defensive technologies that protected thousands of military personnel. $2 million to orchestrate an attack that could have killed hundreds of innocent people. "You're supposed to be resting, Lieutenant Commander." Maya looked up to find Chief Williams standing in the doorway. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee, steam rising from both. "Couldn't sleep, Chief." "Neither could I." Williams set 1 cup in front of her and took a seat across the table. "Keep thinking about what happened today. What almost happened." Maya wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for the gesture. "Chief, can I ask you something?" "Of course, ma'am." "How did you know at the checkpoint before everything went wrong? You were watching me differently than the others. You noticed things that Morrison missed. How did you know I wasn't what I appeared to be?" Williams considered the question carefully. "Ma'am, I've been in the Navy for 27 years. I've served under officers of every rank and every temperament. You learn to recognize certain qualities. The way someone stands. The way they respond to pressure. The way they carry themselves when they think no one is watching. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. When Morrison was searching you, humiliating you in front of all those people, you didn't react like a civilian. You didn't get angry or scared or defensive. You just waited, patient, controlled, like you knew exactly how the situation would unfold. Maya nodded slowly. I didn't know. Not exactly. But I've been trained to manage stress in hostile environments. I've spent years learning how to maintain composure when everything around me is falling apart. That training showed, ma'am. Morrison was so focused on proving you were a threat that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. A young woman with more command presence than most admirals I've served under. The compliment brought a faint smile to Maya's exhausted face. Thank you, Chief. That means a lot, especially today. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, reviewing documents and making notes for the investigation ahead. The companionship was welcome. After the isolation of her undercover work and the betrayal by someone she had trusted, having an ally felt like a lifeline. Lieutenant Commander? Williams spoke carefully, as if choosing his words with precision. There's something I need to tell you. Something that might be relevant to your investigation. Maya looked up sharply. What is it? 6 months ago, when you first arrived at Norfolk to begin your investigation, Foster called me into his office. He said he wanted me to keep an eye on you. Report on your movements, your questions, who you talked to. Maya's blood ran cold. You were spying on me for him? He framed it as security protocol. Said you were young and inexperienced, that you might need guidance without knowing it. I believed him at first. Williams met her eyes directly. But the things he asked me to report didn't make sense. He wanted to know which files you were accessing, which personnel you were interviewing, which systems you were examining. It wasn't protection. It was surveillance. When did you stop reporting to him? About 2 months ago. I started noticing inconsistencies, questions he asked that revealed knowledge he shouldn't have had. Meetings that happened right after my reports. I stopped giving him detailed information, started making things up. Williams paused. I should have come forward sooner. I should have told someone what I suspected. Maya processed this revelation with conflicting emotions. Williams had been used as an unwitting tool of Foster's surveillance operation. But he had also recognized something was wrong and taken steps to protect her, even without fully understanding the situation. Chief, you couldn't have known what Foster was planning. No one did. The fact that you trusted your instincts and stopped cooperating probably saved my life. If Foster had known exactly where I was in my investigation, he could have moved against me much sooner. Williams exhaled slowly, relief visible in his weathered features. I've been carrying that guilt since the attack began. Wondering if I could have prevented this if I had spoken up earlier. You couldn't have. Foster had been building this operation for years. One person's suspicions wouldn't have been enough to stop him. Maya stood and extended her hand. But now we need your help to finish what we started. Everything you observed about Foster's behavior, every inconsistency you noticed, could be crucial evidence. Williams shook her hand firmly. You'll have my full cooperation, Lieutenant Commander. Whatever you need. The door to the analysis room opened again, and Captain Morrison entered with a tablet clutched in his hands. His face was pale with urgency. Lieutenant Commander Chen, we have a problem. Foster survived the helicopter crash. Maya felt her heart stop for exactly 1 second. He's alive. Barely. Emergency responders pulled him from the wreckage with multiple injuries. He's currently in surgery at the Naval Medical Center. Doctors say he has a 70% chance of survival. The implications raced through Maya's mind. If Foster survived, he could provide crucial intelligence about his network. But he could also coordinate with remaining allies, destroy evidence, or find ways to escape justice. I need security on him immediately. Armed guards at every entrance. No visitors without my personal authorization. And I want his communications monitored even if he's unconscious." "Already done, ma'am. Admiral Harrison anticipated your orders." Morrison hesitated, his expression troubled. "But there's something else." "Foster regained consciousness briefly before surgery. He asked to speak with you." "What did he say?" "He said, and I quote, 'Tell Chen she caught the small fish. The sharks are still swimming.'" The message sent a chill down Maya's spine. Foster wasn't the end of the conspiracy. He was just one node in a larger network. And that network was still operational, still dangerous, still capable of striking again. "I need to talk to him, as soon as he's out of surgery." "Ma'am, doctors say he won't be coherent for at least 12 hours. Major internal injuries, significant blood loss. They're not even certain he'll survive the night." 12 hours. 12 hours for Foster's allies to learn about his capture. 12 hours for evidence to be destroyed. 12 hours for the sharks he mentioned to disappear into the depths. "Then we work faster." Maya turned to Williams. "Chief, I need you to compile everything Foster said or did in the past 6 months that seemed unusual. Every meeting, every communication, every unexplained absence. Cross-reference it with the intelligence we recovered from the hostile forces." "Yes, ma'am." "Captain Morrison, contact Admiral Harrison. I need authorization to access Foster's classified communications immediately. Not tomorrow, not after the doctors clear him. Now." Morrison nodded and rushed to make the call. Maya returned to the documents spread across the table, her exhaustion forgotten in the face of this new urgency. Foster's words echoed in her mind. "The small fish. The sharks are still swimming." If Foster was the small fish, who were the sharks? The answer came 3 hours later, delivered by an encrypted transmission that Admiral Harrison received directly from the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington. "Lieutenant Commander Chen." Harrison's voice was grave as he called her into his private office. "We have a situation that extends far beyond what happened at Norfolk." Maya stood at attention, her fatigue temporarily overcome by adrenaline. "What kind of situation, Admiral?" Foster wasn't working alone. He was part of a network that spans 3 naval installations across the Pacific Fleet: Naval Station Pearl Harbor, Naval Base Guam, and a third location that we're still trying to identify. How do we know this? Because 30 minutes ago, similar cyber attacks were launched against Pearl Harbor and Guam. Both installations experienced the same pattern of electronic warfare, ground force incursions, and coordinated system failures that we saw here at Norfolk. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Are the attacks ongoing? Pearl Harbor repelled their assault using emergency protocols similar to what you implemented here. Guam wasn't as fortunate. They're still fighting. Harrison paused, his expression carrying a weight that seemed almost unbearable. Lieutenant Commander, there are approximately 3,000 personnel on Guam who are currently under attack, and the defensive systems that were supposed to protect them have been compromised. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Foster hadn't just been selling Norfolk's secrets. He had been coordinating a network of traitors across the entire Pacific Fleet, systematically compromising American defensive capabilities at multiple installations simultaneously. Admiral, I need to contact Guam. The protocols I used here, the manual override systems, they should work there too. That's exactly why I called you in, Lieutenant Commander. The CNO wants you to coordinate defensive operations for Guam remotely. You're the only person alive who fully understands the systems that are currently under attack. Maya didn't hesitate. Get me a secure line to Guam's operations center, now. For the next 4 hours, Maya fought a war across 6,000 miles of Pacific Ocean. Her voice became a lifeline for the desperate personnel on Guam, guiding them through manual defense protocols and counterattack procedures that most had never seen outside of theoretical training exercises. Guam operations, this is Chen. Your tertiary backup systems are located in the maintenance tunnel beneath Building Charlie. Access code is 77 Alpha Tango. Activate those systems and you'll restore partial communications. Lieutenant Commander, hostile forces have breached the perimeter near the ammunition storage facility. We're taking heavy casualties. Route your defensive teams through Corridor Delta 7. There's a concealed access point that provides elevated positions for suppressive fire. The hostiles won't know it's there because it wasn't included in the standard facility maps. Hour after hour, Maya coordinated a defense that should have been impossible. She directed personnel she had never met through facilities she had never visited, using knowledge that existed only in classified databases she had helped create. By dawn, Guam had been secured. The hostile forces had been neutralized or captured. The cyber attack had been repelled. And Maya Chen had added another impossible victory to a career that was rapidly becoming legendary. Lieutenant Commander. Admiral Harrison's voice interrupted her exhausted concentration. Guam is safe. You can stand down. Maya slumped in her chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her finally depleting. Her hands were shaking. Her vision was blurring around the edges. She had been awake for over 30 hours, most of that time spent in active combat operations or crisis coordination. Admiral, we need to find the third installation. Foster said there were 3 nodes in the network. Norfolk, Pearl Harbor, Guam. But you said there's a third location we haven't identified. We're working on it, Lieutenant Commander. But right now you need medical attention. You've pushed yourself beyond human limits. I can't stop now. Every hour we wait is an hour the sharks have to escape. Harrison moved closer, his voice carrying paternal concern beneath the authority. Lieutenant Commander Chen, you have personally coordinated the defense of 2 major naval installations against coordinated military assaults. You have identified and exposed a traitor who evaded detection for years. You have saved thousands of American lives, but you cannot continue operating without rest. You are a valuable asset, and I will not allow you to destroy yourself in pursuit of perfection. Maya wanted to argue. The urgency of the situation demanded continued action, but her body was betraying her systems shutting down despite her will to continue. 4 hours, she said finally. Give me 4 hours of sleep. Then I need to interrogate Foster. Agreed. But Lieutenant Commander, when you wake up, there's something else we need to discuss. What? Harrison's expression shifted to something that looked almost like pride. The Chief of Naval Operations has been monitoring your performance. He wants to speak with you personally when this crisis is resolved. Maya processed this information through the fog of exhaustion. A direct conversation with the CNO was significant. It could mean commendation. It could mean promotion. It could mean assignment to higher levels of responsibility. Or it could mean questions about her methods, her judgment, her decision to operate undercover without full coordination with her chain of command. Understood, Admiral. 4 hours. She made her way to the temporary quarters that had been assigned to her and collapsed onto the bed without removing her uniform. Sleep came instantly deep and dreamless, her body finally surrendering to the demands of biology. When she woke exactly 4 hours later, she found a message waiting on her phone. 3 words that sent ice through her veins. Foster is talking. Maya was at the medical center within 15 minutes. Foster's room was guarded by 4 armed Marines who checked her credentials twice before allowing entry. The man lying in the hospital bed looked nothing like the confident mentor who had recruited her from Stanford. Bandages covered most of his visible skin. Tubes and monitors surrounded him like technological tentacles. His eyes, when they opened, held a mixture of pain and something that might have been amusement. Maya. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper. You came. I knew you would. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. Foster managed a faint smile. Always so direct. It's one of the things I admired about you, you know. No games, no pretense, just pure focused determination. You admired me while you were using me to sell American secrets to our enemies. I was using you to save American lives, Maya. You just can't see the bigger picture. Maya's jaw tightened. The bigger picture: you coordinated attacks on 3 naval installations. You tried to kill hundreds of military personnel and civilians. You sold defensive technologies to hostile foreign powers. What possible picture makes any of that acceptable? Foster's eyes grew distant, as if he was seeing something beyond the hospital room. The technologies I sold, Maya, they were going to be compromised eventually. Every defensive system ever created has been eventually defeated. The only question was whether we would be prepared when it happened. What are you talking about? I didn't sell our secrets to our enemies, Maya. I sold them to competitors who would eventually become enemies anyway. And in exchange, I learned exactly how they planned to exploit our vulnerabilities. Every attack today was anticipated. Every weakness was documented. Every countermeasure was already designed. Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You're claiming this was some kind of intelligence operation, that you deliberately compromised American security to gather information about enemy capabilities. I'm claiming that the world is more complicated than you understand, that sometimes protecting America requires methods that can't be explained in training manuals or justified in congressional hearings. You're claiming that the ends justify the means. Foster's smile faded. I'm claiming that the people who attacked us today were planning to attack us anyway. The only difference is that now we know exactly how they operate. We know their tactics, their technologies, their network of contacts and supporters. That intelligence is worth more than any defensive system I helped them compromise. Maya felt rage building in her chest. Foster was trying to justify treason as patriotism, trying to reframe betrayal as protection, trying to make her believe that the man who had manipulated and deceived her had actually been working for the same goals all along. The sharks you mentioned, who are they? Foster's expression shifted to something that looked almost like genuine concern. Maya, there are people in this world who believe that American military dominance is the greatest threat to global stability. Not terrorists, not rogue states, Americans. People in positions of power who have convinced themselves that weakening our defenses serves the greater good. Give me names. I can give you something better. I can give you the network. Every contact, every communication, every financial transaction. But there's a price. You're not in a position to negotiate. Everyone is always in a position to negotiate, Maya. You just need to understand what the other party values. Foster paused, his breathing becoming labored. I want immunity, not for myself. I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison, however long that turns out to be, but I want immunity for my family. My daughter is 14 years old. She had nothing to do with any of this. I want your personal guarantee that she will be protected. Maya studied the man who had been her mentor, her supporter, her betrayer. The man who had orchestrated attacks that nearly killed hundreds of people. The man who was now bargaining for his daughter's safety using information that could expose an entire network of traitors. Your daughter will be protected. You have my word. Foster nodded, slowly, relief visible in his damaged features. The third installation, the one you haven't identified yet. It's not a naval base. Maya leaned forward. Where is it? It's the Pentagon, Maya. The next attack is targeting the Pentagon, and it's scheduled for 48 hours from now. 48 hours. The Pentagon. The words burned in Maya's mind as she sprinted from Foster's hospital room toward the command center. Admiral Harrison was already on a secure line with Washington when she burst through the door. His face told her everything she needed to know. The threat was real. The clock was ticking, and the stakes had just escalated beyond anything they had faced at Norfolk. "Lieutenant Commander Chen has the intelligence." Harrison handed her the phone. "Sir, she's the one who broke Foster. She needs to brief you directly." Maya took the phone, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "This is Lieutenant Commander Chen." "Chen, this is Admiral Marcus Wright, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff." The voice on the other end was controlled but urgent. "Harrison tells me you have credible intelligence about an attack on the Pentagon. Talk to me." Sir David Foster confirmed that the network he built extends beyond Pacific Fleet installations. The attacks on Norfolk, Pearl Harbor, and Guam were preliminary operations. The primary target has always been the Pentagon. Attack is scheduled for approximately 46 hours from now. "What's the attack vector?" "Same pattern as Norfolk, sir. Coordinated cyber assault to disable defensive systems, followed by ground force incursions, targeting critical infrastructure. But the Pentagon's systems are more sophisticated. They'll need inside access to compromise them effectively." "You're saying there's another mole inside the Pentagon?" "Yes, sir. Foster didn't give me a name, but he provided enough information to narrow the search. Someone with access to the Pentagon's cyber defense architecture. Someone who has been feeding intelligence to the same network that coordinated today's attacks." There was a pause on the line. When Wright spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Maya's spine straighten involuntarily. "Lieutenant Commander, I'm authorizing your immediate transfer to Washington. You'll be leading a joint task force to identify and neutralize this threat. Admiral Harrison will arrange transport. You leave within the hour." "Understood, sir. Chen." Wright's voice softened slightly. "What you did at Norfolk today? What you did for Guam? That's the kind of performance that changes careers. Don't let the pressure of what comes next make you forget what you've already accomplished." "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." The line went dead. Maya handed the phone back to Harrison, her mind already racing through the tactical challenges ahead. "Admiral, I need Chief Williams on this transport. He's been invaluable throughout this operation, and I'll need someone I can trust in Washington." Harrison nodded. "Done. Anyone else?" Maya thought about the question carefully. The investigation ahead would require people with specific skills: intelligence analysis, cybersecurity, counter-espionage. But more than skills, she needed people whose loyalty was beyond question. "Sergeant Morrison?" Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Morrison, the man who publicly humiliated you at the checkpoint. Morrison made a mistake in judgment, Admiral. But when the crisis hit, he followed orders and performed his duties without hesitation. More importantly, he's been living with the guilt of that mistake for the past 30 hours. That kind of conscience is valuable. People who can recognize their errors and learn from them are exactly the kind of people I need on my team." Harrison studied her face for a long moment. "You're a remarkable officer, Lieutenant Commander. Most people in your position would want nothing to do with Morrison. Most people haven't learned what I've learned in the past 2 days, Admiral. The ability to see past initial impressions, to recognize potential in unexpected places, that's not just a leadership skill. It's a survival skill. Foster taught me that lesson even if he didn't intend to." And within 45 minutes, Maya was aboard a military transport aircraft heading for Washington. Williams sat across from her, reviewing the intelligence files Foster had provided. Morrison occupied a seat near the back, his expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Lieutenant Commander?" Williams looked up from his tablet. "I've been analyzing Foster's financial records. The money trail leads to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. That company has connections to 3 other entities, one of which has significant contracts with the Department of Defense." "Which department?" "Cybersecurity Division. They provide consulting services for Pentagon infrastructure protection." Maya felt pieces clicking into place. The traitor inside the Pentagon wasn't just someone with access to defensive systems. It was someone whose job was to protect those systems, someone who could identify vulnerabilities while pretending to fix them. Get me a list of every consultant from that company who has worked inside the Pentagon in the past 2 years. Cross-reference with security clearance records and access logs. Already working on it, ma'am. Morrison approached their seats, his posture hesitant, but his voice steady. Lieutenant Commander, permission to speak. Go ahead, Sergeant. Ma'am, I want you to know that I understand why you included me on this team. And I want you to know that I will spend every moment of this operation proving that your trust wasn't misplaced. Maya met his eyes directly. Sergeant Morrison, I didn't include you on this team because I trust you. I included you because I believe you have the potential to earn that trust. The next 48 hours will determine whether I was right. Morrison nodded slowly. Understood, ma'am. I won't let you down. Don't let yourself down, Sergeant. That's what really matters. The transport landed at Andrews Air Force Base 3 hours later. A convoy of vehicles was waiting to escort Maya's team directly to the Pentagon, where Admiral Wright and a collection of senior military and intelligence officials had assembled for an emergency briefing. The conference room was filled with some of the most powerful people in the American military establishment. 4-star generals, intelligence agency directors, senior civilian officials from the Department of Defense, all of them focused on the young woman who had somehow become the central figure in the most significant security crisis since September 11th. Lieutenant Commander Chen, Admiral Wright stood at the head of the table. Give us everything you have. Maya stepped to the front of the room, keenly aware that she was the youngest person present by at least 15 years. But the events of the past 2 days had burned away whatever insecurity she might have felt. She had earned her place at this table through actions, not credentials. Ladies and gentlemen, approximately 36 hours ago, Norfolk Naval Base was attacked by a coordinated force using American defensive technologies that had been systematically compromised by Lieutenant Commander David Foster. Simultaneous attacks were launched against Pearl Harbor and Guam. All 3 assaults were repelled, but they were never the primary objective. She activated a display showing the Pentagon's layout and defensive architecture. The real target has always been this building. The attacks on Pacific Fleet installations were proof of concept operations designed to demonstrate the effectiveness of compromised American technologies to potential buyers. The Pentagon attack is the main event. What's the attack vector? General Patricia Hayes, commander of U.S. Cyber Command, leaned forward with intense focus. Same pattern as Norfolk, but scaled up significantly. Initial cyber assault to disable communications and security systems, followed by ground force incursion through pre-identified access points. Primary targets are the National Military Command Center, the Defense Intelligence Agency Operations Center, and the Secretary of Defense's office. How do they plan to penetrate our perimeter security? They already have General. Foster's network includes at least one asset inside the Pentagon. Someone with access to cyber defense systems and knowledge of security protocols. That asset has been providing real-time intelligence about vulnerabilities for at least 18 months. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. The idea that a traitor had been operating inside the Pentagon for over a year was almost too disturbing to contemplate. Do we have identification on this asset? CIA Director Sarah Mitchell asked. We're narrowing it down, ma'am. Foster provided enough information to identify approximately 12 potential suspects. All have the access and clearance necessary to accomplish what the attackers need. 12 suspects and 30-something hours to find the right one. Mitchell's expression was grim. That's not a lot of time, Lieutenant Commander. No, ma'am, it isn't, which is why I'm proposing a different approach. Maya pulled up a new display showing the Pentagon's cyber defense architecture, the same systems she had helped design during her work with Foster's team years earlier. We don't find the traitor. We let the traitor find us. Admiral Wright frowned. Explain. Sir, the Pentagon attack requires real-time coordination between the traitor inside and the assault force outside. Without that coordination, the attackers won't know which systems have been compromised or which access points are vulnerable. I propose we create false intelligence, suggesting that the attack timeline has been moved up by 24 hours. We disseminate that intelligence through channels that only our 12 suspects can access. Whoever passes that information to the attackers reveals themselves. That's a significant risk, Lieutenant Commander. If the traitor realizes what we're doing, they could accelerate the real attack or go to ground entirely. Yes, sir. But it's also our best chance to identify the threat before it materializes. Every other approach requires time we don't have. The room fell silent as senior officials considered Maya's proposal. The strategy was bold, unconventional, and carried significant risks. But it was also the kind of creative thinking that had allowed her to defend Norfolk against impossible odds. Do it! Admiral Wright made the decision with characteristic directness. Chen, you have operational authority to implement your plan. Whatever resources you need, you have them. Thank you, sir. For the next 6 hours, Maya coordinated the dissemination of false intelligence through carefully controlled channels. Each of the 12 suspects received slightly different versions of the same information, designed to identify which specific individual was passing secrets to the attackers. By midnight, they had their answer. Lieutenant Commander! Williams approached her workstation with a tablet showing intercepted communications. One of our suspects just made contact with an encrypted server in Eastern Europe. The message contained exact details from the false intelligence package we created for him. Who? Robert Caldwell, senior cybersecurity consultant. He's been working inside the Pentagon for 3 years, advising on infrastructure protection and vulnerability assessment. Maya stared at the name. Robert Caldwell. She had met him once at a conference on military cyber defense. He had seemed brilliant, dedicated, passionate about protecting American interests. Another mask hiding another traitor. Where is he now? Security systems show him entering the building approximately 4 hours ago. He's currently in his office on the 4th floor. Has he attempted to leave? Negative, ma'am. He appears to be working late like dozens of other people in the building. Maya made a decision. We take him now. Quietly. I don't want the assault force to know their inside man has been compromised. Ma'am, if we arrest Caldwell, won't the attackers realize something is wrong? Not if we're careful. We take Caldwell into custody, but we continue sending messages from his accounts as if nothing has happened. The attackers will think their operation is proceeding normally until they discover their assault is walking into a trap. The arrest was executed with surgical precision. 6 agents converged on Caldwell's office, simultaneously giving him no opportunity to destroy evidence or send warnings to his handlers. Within 3 minutes, he was in custody, his communications devices secured for analysis. Maya conducted the interrogation personally. Caldwell sat in the detention room with his hands cuffed to the table. His expression was defiant, but Maya could see fear behind the facade. Mr. Caldwell, you've been feeding intelligence to a network of foreign actors planning an assault on this building. We have documented evidence of your communications. We have your financial records showing payments from offshore accounts. And we have approximately 24 hours before the attack you helped plan is supposed to begin. I want a lawyer. You'll have access to legal counsel after this crisis is resolved. Right now, you have a choice. Cooperate and provide information that helps us prevent this attack or face prosecution for treason during wartime. The death penalty is very much on the table. Caldwell's defiance cracked slightly. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The people behind this operation, they're not terrorists or foreign agents. They're Americans, powerful Americans who believe that military weakness is the path to world peace. I've heard this speech before, Mr. Caldwell. David Foster gave me a version of it about 12 hours ago. It didn't convince me then. It won't convince me now. Foster was a true believer. I'm just a businessman. They paid me to provide information, and I provided it. I don't care about their ideology or their goals. Then you shouldn't have any problem telling me everything you know about their plans. Caldwell studied her face for a long moment. What do I get in exchange? You get to avoid the death penalty. You get to spend the rest of your life in prison instead of facing execution. That's the best deal you're going to get. Not good enough. Maya leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Mr. Caldwell, in approximately 20 hours, armed forces are going to attempt to breach this building. They're going to kill American military personnel. They're going to target the leadership of our armed forces, and they're going to do it using information that you provided. She paused, letting her words sink in. If you don't help us stop them, and even one person dies as a result, I will personally ensure that you are executed for treason. Not imprisoned. Executed. Do you understand? Caldwell's remaining defiance evaporated. The assault force is staging in a warehouse district approximately 20 miles from here. They have vehicles, weapons, and detailed floor plans of the building. The attack is scheduled for 0600 tomorrow during the shift change when security is at its weakest. How many personnel? 50 to 60. All professionals, former military from various countries. Well-trained, well-equipped, well-paid. What's their extraction plan? Helicopters. 3 of them. They're supposed to land on the Pentagon's roof after the assault teams secure the upper floors. The whole operation is designed to last less than 30 minutes. Maya absorbed this information while simultaneously formulating defensive strategies. 50 to 60 trained fighters attempting to breach the Pentagon during a shift change. It would be a bloodbath if the attack succeeded. One more question, Mr. Caldwell. Who's funding this operation? Not the ideologues Foster mentioned. The actual money. Where does it come from? Caldwell hesitated. I don't know the complete picture, but the payments I received came through the same channels Foster was using. The network is larger than any individual. It's been operating for years, compromising installations across the Pacific Fleet, preparing for what they call the reset. The reset. They believe that American military dominance has created global instability, that the only way to achieve lasting peace is to demonstrate that American power can be challenged. The Pentagon attack isn't just about destruction. It's about sending a message, proving that nowhere is safe, that American military leadership is vulnerable. Maya felt cold fury building in her chest. The people behind this conspiracy weren't foreign enemies. They were Americans who had convinced themselves that weakening their own country served some greater good, traitors who wrapped their betrayal in the language of peace and progress. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Caldwell. Guards, take him to holding. As Caldwell was led away, Maya turned to find Admiral Wright standing in the doorway. He had been listening to the entire interrogation. Lieutenant Commander, you have the location of the assault force and their timeline. What's your recommendation? Sir, I recommend we hit them first. A preemptive strike on their staging area before they can launch. We take them out on our terms, not theirs. Wright nodded slowly. Agreed. I'm authorizing an immediate operation. SEAL Team 6 is standing by. You'll coordinate the assault. Me, sir. You've proven yourself 3 times in the past 48 hours, Lieutenant Commander. Norfolk, Guam, and now this. You know the enemy's capabilities better than anyone. You understand their tactics because you designed the systems they're trying to exploit. Wright paused, his expression carrying something that looked like respect. This is your fight, Chen. See it through. 3 hours later, Maya stood in the Tactical Operations Center as American Special Forces moved on the assault team's staging area. She coordinated the operation through multiple communication channels, directing teams to specific positions based on her knowledge of the attackers' likely responses. Alpha Team in position. We have visual on approximately 40 hostiles inside the warehouse. Bravo team confirming secondary staging area. Additional 15 to 20 hostiles in adjacent building. Sniper teams reporting clear lines of fire, awaiting authorization to engage. Maya keyed her radio. All teams, this is Chen. Authorization granted. Execute. 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 The assault was overwhelming and decisive. American forces breached multiple entry points simultaneously, using speed and surprise to neutralize the threat before the attackers could organize effective resistance. The operation lasted 17 minutes. Alpha Team reporting warehouse secured. 32 hostiles neutralized, 8 in custody. Bravo Team reporting secondary location secured. All hostiles neutralized or captured. Sniper teams reporting no escapees. Perimeter is secure. Maya exhaled slowly, releasing tension that had been building for 2 days. The assault force was destroyed. The Pentagon attack had been prevented. And the network that had compromised American security across the Pacific Fleet was finally broken. But there was one more thing she needed to do. 72 hours after the crisis began, Maya stood in the Pentagon's main auditorium before an audience of 500 military personnel. Admiral Wright was at the podium, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 days ago, the largest naval base in the world came under attack. The assault was coordinated using compromised American technologies orchestrated by traitors within our own ranks, and designed to demonstrate that American military installations are vulnerable to sophisticated enemies. Wright paused, his eyes scanning the audience. That attack failed, as did subsequent attacks on Pearl Harbor and Guam, as did the planned assault on this very building, and the person most responsible for those failures is standing before you today. He gestured toward Maya. Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen arrived at Norfolk Naval Base as an undercover investigator. She was publicly searched and humiliated at a security checkpoint by personnel who had no idea who she was or what she was capable of accomplishing. And when the attack began, she didn't reveal her identity to avoid embarrassment or claim special treatment. She simply did her job. Wright's voice grew stronger. She coordinated the defense of Norfolk while simultaneously identifying the traitor who had compromised our systems. She remotely directed defensive operations that saved Guam from destruction. She developed and implemented the strategy that exposed the Pentagon conspiracy and led to the neutralization of the assault force. And she did all of this while being personally targeted for elimination by enemies who understood exactly how dangerous she was. He turned to face Maya directly. Lieutenant Commander Chen, your actions over the past 3 days represent the finest traditions of naval service. Your courage, your competence, and your unwavering dedication to protecting American lives and interests have earned you recognition at the highest levels of our military establishment. Wright reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. By order of the President of the United States, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Commander. Furthermore, you are awarded the Navy Distinguished Service Medal for extraordinary heroism and exceptionally meritorious service during combat operations. Maya stepped forward to receive the medal, her expression controlled, but her heart pounding with emotions she couldn't fully process. Pride, gratitude, and something else. The knowledge that her father, the Navy communications specialist whose equipment had helped her detect the attack, would have been proud of what his daughter had become. Commander Chen. Wright pinned the medal to her uniform. The Navy and the nation are grateful for your service. Thank you, sir. As Maya turned to face the audience, she saw familiar faces in the crowd. Chief Williams standing at attention with tears in his eyes. Morrison, his expression carrying a mixture of shame and admiration that would take years to fully resolve. And dozens of others, men and women, who had witnessed her transformation from suspected security threat to decorated hero. The applause began slowly, then built to a thunderous crescendo that filled the auditorium and echoed through the corridors beyond. But Maya's attention was drawn to a small group near the back of the room. Civilian clothes, quiet demeanor, watching her with expressions that suggested they understood exactly what she had sacrificed and what she had achieved. One of them nodded slightly. A gesture of recognition from people who operated in the shadows, whose names would never appear in official records, whose work protected the nation in ways that could never be publicly acknowledged. Maya returned the nod. She understood what they were offering, and she understood what it would cost. After the ceremony, Admiral Wright pulled her aside. "Commander Chen, the Chief of Naval Operations, wants you to lead a new task force. Permanent assignment. Hunting the remaining elements of the network that Foster and Caldwell were part of." "Sir, I'm honored, but I need to ask something first." "Go ahead." "The people who planned these attacks, the Americans who believed they were serving peace by compromising our defenses, are we going to find all of them?" Wright's expression grew somber. "Honestly, probably not. Networks like this have deep roots. Some members will escape, some will go underground, some will continue operating in ways we can't detect." "Then my answer is yes, sir. I'll lead the task force, and I won't stop until every last one of them is brought to justice." Wright studied her face, seeing the determination that had carried her through impossible challenges and would carry her through the battles ahead. "I believe you, Commander. I believe you will." That evening, Maya stood alone at the Norfolk Naval Base Memorial, looking out over the water where her father had once served. The equipment she had carried through the checkpoint, the equipment that had detected the attack and helped save thousands of lives, rested in her hands. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. A young woman publicly humiliated by a security sergeant who couldn't see past her age and appearance. A defender who had saved 3 military installations against impossible odds. A hunter who had exposed traitors at the highest levels of American military leadership. And now, a commander who would spend her career protecting the nation that her father had given his life to serve. Morrison approached from behind his footsteps, hesitant on the memorial's stone surface. "Commander Chen, I wanted to say something before you leave for Washington." Maya turned to face him. "Go ahead, Sergeant." "Ma'am, when I searched you at that checkpoint, I saw a young woman in a hoodie carrying suspicious equipment. I made assumptions based on appearance, based on age, based on everything I thought I knew about who belongs in positions of authority." Morrison paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong, and I will spend the rest of my career remembering that lesson." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse and the beginning of growth that would eventually make him a better leader. "Sergeant Morrison, the mistake you made wasn't seeing a young woman in a hoodie. It was assuming that youth and appearance determine capability. That's a mistake a lot of people make. What matters is what you do with that knowledge going forward." "What should I do, ma'am?" "Question your assumptions. Look deeper than surface impressions. Remember that the person standing in front of you might be exactly what they appear to be, or they might be something completely different. And treat everyone with the respect they deserve until they prove they don't deserve it." Morrison nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Yes, ma'am, I'll remember." Maya turned back to the memorial, to the names of fallen service members that stretched across the polished stone surface. Her father's name wasn't there. He had died in a different conflict at a different time, but his spirit lived in her in the dedication and courage that had made everything she accomplished possible. "Commander Chen." Williams approached from the other direction. "Your transport to Washington is ready." Maya took one last look at the water at the base she had saved at the beginning of everything that was still to come. "Thank you, Chief, for everything." "The honor was mine, ma'am. The absolute honor." She walked toward the waiting vehicle, toward the new challenges that awaited her in Washington, toward the battles she would fight to protect the nation she loved. Behind her, the sun set over Norfolk Naval Base, casting golden light across facilities that had survived, because one young woman refused to be defined by how others perceived her. Maya Chen had arrived at Norfolk as an investigator in disguise. She left as a decorated commander with a mission that would define the rest of her career. And somewhere in the vast network of American military installations, the remaining traitors who had tried to destroy her life's work were learning a lesson they would never forget. They had underestimated her because of her age. They had dismissed her because of her appearance. They had tried to humiliate her, to break her, to eliminate her. And they had failed. Because Maya Chen was never just a young woman in a Stanford hoodie. She was and always had been exactly what America needed her to be. A warrior, a protector, a commander who would never stop fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The sharks were still out there. But now they knew that someone was hunting them. Someone who had beaten them at their own game and would spend the rest of her life making sure they could never threaten American security again. And that knowledge Maya understood was more powerful than any weapon she could ever design. The battle for Norfolk was over. The war for American security would continue. And Commander Maya Chen would be leading the charge one victory at a time until every last enemy of freedom understood a simple truth. Never underestimate the woman they tried to shame at the checkpoint. She just might end up saving the world.